Hey everybody, and welcome back to the board meeting. Today we are going to be reviewing one of my most highly anticipated games of the last couple of years. That is the Dwellings of Eldervale. This is a big, giant, sprawling game for 1 to 5 players designed by Luke Lowry, and I have been waiting for this game for a long time. I missed the Kickstarter edition a few years back, and then I seen all these reviews coming out saying how great this game was, and a bunch of reviewers that I usually tend to align myself with. I'm like, okay, yeah, I'd like to get that, and then, but they didn't. It wasn't available retail, so I had to pre-order the second printing edition of this, and it finally came like 2 or 3 months ago, and it just sat on my shelf for a while because it is a big game. It's very intimidating looking, and so I finally got it played, and then I played it. So I played it several times, and I'm ready to give my review on it. But before I get to that, let's go down to the table, and I'll give a very brief overview of how this game actually works, the mechanisms of it. So let's go down to the table for a few minutes. Here we have a 2-player game set up for Dwellings of Eldervale, and we have the Stonehelm Dwarves versus the Clerics of the Dawn, white versus yellow. Like I said, this is 2-player game setup. The grid is going to depend on player count, how big it is, and how big it expands is going to depend on player count as well. So in this game, you are basically going to be doing one of two things. You're either going to be putting out units or then taking them back and regrouping. So on your turn, you can either place out a troop, one of your units that you have, and you start with 3 workers each, and you have other workers. Everything comes in this nice little tray. If it's in that tray, it's not in play at the moment. If you have them out here, it's in your ready area. So you got your 3 more workers. You have a wizard, you have a warrior, and then you have a dragon, along with your dwellings and your resources down here. On the board, we have 2 different types of tiles. You have your elemental tiles, which are the colorful tiles, and then you have your ruin tiles, which are the things that will get you to do actions on here. So on your turn, you can place out a worker on a spot, and then you're going to, if it's on an elemental tile, you're going to take one of the resources that are on it, and kind of can take that, turn it in for resources, or keep it to the side for now. So those are going to be the elemental tiles. Very simple, going to them and then taking them off, taking the resources from them. There is 5 different types of these ruin tiles. They're pretty simple to do. This is putting 2 resources of any type and getting 2 gold resources. And gold resources are basically wild resources. You can use them as anything. Here, you're going to spend 2 resources and get 3 magic cards, and you have to discard one. We all start with 5 magic cards. Magic cards are going to do different things. They're going to let you get points for questing, which is completing certain objectives. There's going to be spell cards that are going to do different things. And then there are going to be endgame point cards as well. So magic cards are very useful and can be pretty powerful. There is the portal, which is going to help you summon the rest of your troops. On your starting card that everybody has, it shows you what the cost is to get certain troops out. So for your first worker to buy him, it's just 1 resource of anything. Second is 2. Third is 3 resources of anything. The warrior and the wizard and the dragon are going to cost different things. And those troops are going to have different abilities. Without looking at these special abilities for each of your units, which every single faction is going to have, 2 of their units have some kind of special ability that's going to differentiate themselves. When you pick a faction or pick a color, you can pick either or side, and they're going to be 2 different types of factions, and they're going to just give you a little bit of an ability. The workers are just going to be your basic people. They're not going to be very good fighters. They'll only get 1 dice. The warriors are going to get you 2 dice, and when you're placing a warrior, you can go into another region with another player where they have a person and basically initiate a battle on your first turn. The wizard can teleport, because usually you have to go from one region to an adjacent region. With the wizard, you don't have to do that. You can just jump to anywhere. The dragon is kind of like that, but it has flight, so it can go from one spot and it can basically jump a tile and go to another spot over there. Those are the dragons, and the dragon's going to get 3 dice as well for the battles, for the dice battling. That's going to be happening throughout the game. So that is the portal and basically summoning troops. You can go here and go to the mill, which is going to get you a dwelling, which is the game is named after. How you get a dwelling is you take one of your dwellings that's in your little bucket and place it on one of your workers that's out here. And of course I didn't get on there, but you're going to place it on a worker that is in one of the elemental rooms, and you're going to pay whatever the cost is for that tile. So here I would have to pay 2 potions and I get a dwelling in the purple region. That is going to move you up on this track that has all the elements on it. And here we could see, okay, we did a dwelling in the purple region. I would put a marker on the purple region and start. If I had ever build another dwelling, I would go up more on this track. And you want to go up more because you're going to score points for those. The other thing you can do for these ruin tiles is you can go to the dungeon. And the dungeon is going to be how you're going to expand this map. The first thing you do is you grab a tile and then you're going to place it somewhere on your map. And then you're going to go into the dungeon, which is the dungeons are over here. And basically you're going to try to pay for these different cards, getting the resources or spending the resources to get those cards. And you go up on the tracks whatever elemental card you buy. So if I would buy this dark card, I would go up on the dark element track. And you're just going to be moving up. So you're going to be moving up those tracks by either buying cards or by making dwellings. Now, those are all the things you do when you place out a worker. But when you regroup, you're going to take all of your troops off the map, and you're going to eventually get a bunch of cards from over here, and they're going to be sort of build a tableau area for yourself. So you can actually, it almost becomes like a worker placement sort of a deal, where you can do the actions that are on your cards. So if I went there, I could summon, which is, we know that you could get more troops basically by paying those resources. You can gather and get whatever the resource is right there. But that's where these tiles come in, where you can actually replace that spot and make it a different sort of resource for yourself. You can also dwell, and like I said, you're going to dwell the same way that you did before. So if I went there and I wanted to dwell in this spot, I'd have to pay the 3 tools, and then I'd get a dwelling in over here. So that is basically the actions that you can do in the game. But throughout the game, you're going to get a ton more of these cards, and they're going to get you a ton more abilities. Where towards the end of the game, you're going to be doing a lot more from your regroup actions than it feels like when you're doing the other actions. The game is going to end when this pile of tiles runs out, or when the player has built their 6th dwelling. And the game is going to end, everybody gets one more turn, and then you're going to finish the game. At the end of the game, you're going to score a bunch of points for things on your track. You're going to score points for your dwellings that are out here, and you're going to score points depending on how far you are on the track. So if I had this dwelling here, and say I was up on right here on the track, I would get 4 points for every dwelling that's in the purple area. You're also going to score points for every card type of that sort of element, however far you are on the track as well. So these tracks are very important. The other thing that's going to be happening in this game is this dice battling. And there are monsters that are going to be coming out that are against basically everybody in this game. They're not on anybody's side unless you dominate with them, which is a different sort of thing. But basically, when you're battling, say the yellow would come in here, and we're going to battle. These workers only get 1 dice each, so we would both be rolling 1 dice here. You're going to get extra dice throughout the game as well from different things and different effects as well. But say we were battling right here. We would just roll the dice, and whoever had the highest dice would win. So right now the white worker would have won this battle. But say we end up having like a bunch of dice throughout the game. And we would still look at the highest dice, but if we tied, then we would look at the next highest dice. And then whoever won would win. They would go up on this glory track over here, and you're going to get an assortment of different things. You're just going to be moving up along this track, getting different bonuses. If you do lose the battle, you are just going to go to the underworld, and you get a sword for every troop that you get in the underworld. These swords can be spent in battles to get more dice throughout those battles. So you get compensated for losing the battles as well. And I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to show you. You have your rule books and your appendixes and your solo rule book as well up here. But I think that's a very brief overview so you know how the game works. Everybody gets these great player reference cards, which I think are just fantastic. But let's go back up to the top of the table, and I'll give you my thoughts on the product as a whole. So that's a very brief overview of how the game is going to be working. And I didn't go into like every detail of everything, but basically you are either going to be placing out units and taking the actions of those tiles, whatever tile you land on, or else you're bringing all those units back and taking actions on your tableau area of cards that you have built throughout the game. There's also that the track, the elemental track, which is going to be huge in how you're going to score points at the end of the game. The end game scoring is like there's 60 to 70% of your points are going to come from the end game. So just know that. So let's start with component quality of this game. The component quality is great. And for myself, I have the like basic edition of this, the most basic edition you can get of this. And the differences are that I have standees for my monsters basically, and the other ones have miniatures. And then you can get an even more upgraded version where the miniatures have like a sound base to them. I've just got the basic edition of this, but the component quality is really good. There's wooden meeples, wooden dragons, stuff like that. They're good. What's really going to stand out component quality wise for this is all the different trays that come in this game. There's all your factions have trays for them, and they just stay in there, and it's a really good system of how you want to organize this game. It's pretty easy to get everything back in the box, but I'll just say for like setup and teardown, the setup is those boxes, those trays really help with the setup time. I mean, it still is going to take you probably 15 minutes to set this game up. The teardown time actually takes longer because you're removing everything and putting them back in trays, and you're reorganizing. At the end of this game, you're going to have a big mess. So I think the teardown time actually to put away everything actually takes longer than putting this game out on the table. But for such a big sprawling game, it's not bad at all. These trays really help with that time for that. So I give that a thumbs up for that. This is one of the most deceptive looking games for myself. Like I said at the beginning, I was very intimidated by this game, so I didn't get to it for a while. I was putting it off. And then I was like, okay, I'll read the rules. And I read through the rules, and I'm like, oh, this isn't that hard. I would say this is a medium weight game disguised as a hard, very heavy game. But once you read the rulebook, you're like, oh, okay, this all makes sense. I actually enjoy teaching this game now. I don't say that about a lot of games, but I actually enjoy teaching this game because I think everything makes sense. So I think I do a decent job at teaching this game because everything makes sense to me, and it's not too hard. I think it's got a lot of mechanisms, a lot of things going on, but they're all simple mechanisms that are easy to teach, easy to understand, easy to grasp. So I really like that. But yeah, it's just got this intimidating package around it. It's not a difficult game. If you are worried about that, and if you play some medium weight games, it's no harder than say Atlantis Rising or Everdell, in my opinion. It's just a big package game, but it's got some simple mechanisms wrapped around it. The turns for this, the turns can be very quick sometimes. A lot of times you go out onto an elemental tile and you're basically just getting the resource, and then it's like the next person's turn. So those turns take 5 seconds. But there's other turns where you put your person on like a ruin tile, and you're going to do the actions of that, and you're exploring around, putting new tiles out, and going in that dungeon, paying resources. Those can take a little bit longer. What takes the longest, though, is when you're regrouping and you have a lot of troops out on the map, and you are going and placing your people down on like 5-6 spots maybe. So if you've got that going on, those turns can be really, really long actually, because of how many different actions you're taking. It's like you get like 6 turns in one. If you have a ton of troops out there, you're going to be doing a lot. As my dog walks around like he always does. The theme of this, the theme is basically just are these fantasy races trying to be the best race in Eldervale. You know, we want to be the best setup, best developed race, and I think it works for it. It's generic fantasy, but I really enjoy it. I think it all makes sense. It's not a theme that's going to stand out crazy for me, but I think it works for this game. This game is really, it's very much a hybrid game. It's got a lot of Euro mechanisms going on with the engine building, the tableau building, but you've got these dice battling things that are going on. So you've got one of these, it's one of those hybrid type of games that I would compare to like Scythe or Eclipse or Heroes of Land, Air and Sea. There's a lot of, it's kind of one of those types of games, and I tend to enjoy those games. It's just got that hybrid feel to it, and the dice battling in this game. I'm not a huge fan of games that are dice battling games, just because if they're long games, I should say. I don't mind short games that use dice, but if they're long games and they use dice as like a main battling system, I tend not to like those because it's like everything comes down to a dice roll. And this game, it does come down to a dice roll. But the thing about it is, this game is less punishing for losing battles. If you win battles, you basically get to keep your people up out on the map. If you lose battles, you go to the underworld, and but you get compensated with swords, which you can use in later battles, kind of thing. So I don't mind the dice battling system, and there's quite a few different ways that you can mitigate those. I mean, there's a lot of magic cards that deal with how you're going to change your dice and things like that. But it does come down to dice battling, but it's not punishing battling. It's not a there. It is inconvenient at most for the dice battling. So yeah, that's dice battling. The magic cards, I talked about them. These magic cards can have a huge influence on your games. I mean, if you're playing all these spell cards that are letting you do cool things, or you might be completing quests throughout the game, because you have three people in the underworld or something like that, whatever your card says. Then they've got a lot of end game scoring on these cards too. And what's interesting in this, I already said, like, a lot of the game is end game scoring. There are times where you're like, okay, this person's way ahead in this game, but then at the end of the game, since most of it is end game scoring, it's like some person kind of comes out of nowhere and be like, and then they reveal a bunch of these other end game cards that they have as well. So it's really interesting at the end of the game, seeing where everybody ends. What they show for their end game cards is just really interesting. My favorite part of this game, though, is that engine and tableau building phase of this game. And you might overlook that on your first play of this game. I know I did. Because when you get these cards into your thing, you're like, okay, that's pretty neat. But by the end of the game, if you have all these different cards in front of you, and when you're regrouping, you're taking these huge actions, and basically you don't have to worry about resources anymore. You might get points for doing certain things on your tableau cards. You're going to be doing a lot of things on these tableau cards. It's one of the main mechanisms of this game. And it's probably my favorite part of this game, is building that engine, because each game is going to feel different depending on how you're building that engine in front of you. It's going to be pretty interesting. Another thing that makes this game, it's got some variability to it, is the factions. There are 16 different factions in this game, and I showed you this before, but basically there are 8 different elements, so there's 8 different colors you can choose from, and each color has 2 factions that you can choose from there. And they're going to give you a small variability. Each faction's got 2 units that have a unique special ability to that faction. They're pretty small abilities. It's not like a huge difference in them, but they are going to make you play the game slightly different. When you're teaching this game, you're like, okay, you teach the game, and then you're like, by the way, your faction has 2 little special abilities for your units, for specific types of units. And so that makes this game have quite a bit of variability, because you're looking at some other ones, you're like, oh, I want to play that one next time. So it's got a lot of replay value for me, just having all these different abilities out there for you to play with, and how your engine is going to be different every single game. There's just a lot of variability for this game. Now, I played this game at all player counts except for 5 so far. I've played one game, a solo game of this. I've played I played 3 2-player games. I played a 3-player game. I played 3 2-player games, a 3-player game, and 1 4-player game. This game is really good at all player counts. It might be a little bit longer at higher player counts. I mean, each of these games is probably going to take close to 2 hours if you're being honest with yourself. But I also have been playing with new players every single time. So that time is going to cut down itself as well if you're playing with the same group. But yeah, it's been taking my group about 2 hours to play this game. It's taking about half an hour to explain everything in this game to everybody. Maybe 20 to 30 minutes for an explanation. But for the solo game, it's a really easy solo game. Once you know the regular game, it's a really easy solo game to get into. It's just you versus the AI solo opponent, and they're going to have basically a deck of cards, and you're going to be rolling dice for them, and whatever they roll, they're going to activate a certain card, and it's basically going to move their person around. They're going to be building dwellings. It's a really easy solo game to implement if you know the multiplayer game, and I really enjoyed the solo play of this. If you were only a solo player, I would still recommend this game because you're going to enjoy the solo mode for it. You're going to have a good time. But as for me, it has been good at every player count that I've played at so far. So, my overall thoughts of this game, and you can probably tell already that I really, really liked this game. It was one of the most hyped games for myself, and it stood up to that hype for me. I really enjoyed pretty much all the aspects to it. I liked the building of your engine building, your tableau building, moving around, exploring, getting out new tiles, battling other people, battling the monsters, moving up those elemental tracks and stuff. It's a cool game. I really enjoyed it. It's one of my favorite hybrid games out there. This is going to get a 9.5. I really fluctuated between giving it a 10 or a 9. And the only reason I was didn't give it a 10 is because of that dice rolling. Like I said, it's not too punishing when you lose it, but it can throw a wrench into your plans. And if you are rolling really, really bad that game, you might have a bad game of this. And I've seen it with one player where they were like prepared for all these battles, where they're rolling 5, 6 dice and the other person's rolling 2 dice, but they still lose that dice battle because you're just going off that top dice, which I think it's a cool mechanic. But if you are rolling bad, you can have a bad time with this game. But I mean, it's few and far between how I've seen it, and it's not as punishing when you lose those troops. They just go to the underworld kind of thing. And basically, when they go to the underworld, they can't come back and activate on your tableau cards, which can be a bummer for sure, especially if you've got plans for them when you're bringing those troops back. But that's my only flaw for this game. And if you don't mind dice battling, you're going to enjoy it. Everybody I've played this game with has enjoyed it as well. I think it holds up to all the reviews that I've seen, and it's getting a very high review from myself. It's going to definitely be very high up there on my all-time games list. I really have liked this game a lot at every player count, and that matters to myself. But yeah, that's this review for Dwellings of Eldervale. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, make sure to like and subscribe to see more weekly content from me, Shane, at the board meeting in the future. Hope you all have an amazing day. Take care.